Welcome back to Honest Voice. I'm Todd.
I'm Carolsue. Welcome back and thanks for joining us. So last week we talked about the costume of superiority. And in today's episode, we're going to dig a little deeper into where that came from.
Yeah, and before we start, just to respond to an email that we got on our feedback, we've been changing up the equipment a lot. This will apply mostly to the video viewers than it will the audio listeners.
Audio listeners, yeah.
Watch the road if you're in your car, please. Don't watch us. But one of the questions were, they said they're really enjoying the show and they like our dynamic and stuff like that, but they wanted to know why we're always looking at the ceiling.
Right.
So the reason we were looking at the ceiling is because we have a screen behind the cameras and we're basically projecting our teleprompt up on the screen to look for our information to stay on track for you. But because of the camera's positioning, we had all the information above it.
Yeah.
Now we've changed our setup, so we shouldn't be looking at the ceiling anymore because now we can see behind the camera.
That's right.
So just to give a little heads up. And also for the video viewers, we're going to start putting up a picture of our dog, not for the whole show, but, just to enhance our thumbnails, because I don't know if you noticed or not, we're not really catering to the YouTube algorithm. That's something that it hurts us and it helps us at the same time.
True.
Because, being that we're Honest Voice, we're just going to say it. We're not consistent with the mainstream podcast platforms. We don't call people out. We're not trying to take a side. We're trying to show how basically there's problems on both sides that are causing this disconnection, because it's the truth. In our research, in a lot of these cases that are problematic, there's ownership on both sides.
Sure thing.
Yeah, so we're not trying to put blame on anybody, and we really think that one of the things about calling it Honest Voice is that a lot of our problems exist because there are too many things that we say we don't talk about that, or that's disrespectful if you bring that up. And we don't agree. We just believe that communication is data. So the choice to get upset about any topic or any piece of information is based on the individual receiving it. I have had people scream at me and what others would call completely disrespect me, but I didn't feel disrespected because honestly, and I don't mean to sound curt about this, I didn't really care what the other person was saying. Like, I have the choice in that moment to determine what level of value this information has, and it doesn't have anything to do with the person. And the second thing that we don't think about, and this happens a lot, and this is where a lot of conflict goes to the physical side of it, is that a person who thinks they are offended or decides to be offended in a lot of these cases will take action to control the other person now.
Yes.
Like, you don't talk to me that way, or I'm not going to put up with this. And then they try to assert on the other person and change that other person, which you're not going to do with an antagonistic conflict. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand. So the one thing that we're trying to say is we're not consistent with the normal algorithm thing. So it really is helpful. I'm not trying to plead or beg here, but it really is helpful that you do subscribe and you do like our stuff. We are on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. So we just want you to keep in mind that it really is helpful. Our viewership is increasing. Like, we're getting a lot of actual views, and those of you that are emailing us, we really appreciate that. But please go ahead and put that information so everyone can see it, because a couple of the questions that we've received, these are questions that everybody would want to know. So it's much more helpful if you put those in the comments rather than sending us the emails, unless it's a very personal issue. Most of it has been feedback about the show, so we've been very thankful for that. So thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and that's our public service announcement before we get back into this.
Excellent.
And we want to remind everybody that we're still operating in the Spirit of Pride month.
That's right. Happy Pride.
So this is technically the second part of our previous show where we got into as you said, the superiority. That's really a costume.
Yes.
And like we've even said indirectly that the loudest people are actually the more insecure.
Yeah.
And the quiet people are the ones that don't feel the need to prove themselves. I've said on numerous occasions that insecurity is loud and courage is silent. And that's something to keep in mind. And statements like that can probably be offensive to a lot of people. They don't want to be called insecure or perceive themselves as insecure, but that's exactly what our message is. If you feel that way, then that is a coping skill that you can develop, because keep in mind, there are people that don't feel that way. There are people that can say, you know what, I am trying to be the center of attention. I am trying to assert myself. They're taking that information in creatively and educationally and saying, this does apply to me and I can change it. And see, there's no emotional aspect of it. So you can see how that emotional aspect of it is a choice.
Yeah.
Even if it does frustrate you in the moment, you can say to yourself, I can choose to get offended by this, or I can choose to just take it as information. And, even if you take it as information, you can also dismiss that information.
Sure can.
Like we always say, our advice is freely given,
Freely ignored.
So we're not trying to push anything on anybody. We just know that based on research, based on interviews, based on a lot of information that we've been working on for the last decade, that this reduces confrontation.
Yes.
This reduces conflict. And all of these tools apply to one simple thing. we have been made this way. We have been made to react. We've been made to respond. We've been made to respond in a way that's negative, to defend ourselves. All of that stuff's been created. So we're not really trying to change anybody. We're trying to get you back to a stable persona where you're not reacting to this stuff and you don't feel so miserable. I mean, that really is our whole essence. We want to try to identify tools where people don't have to live a life full of so much anxiety and so much sadness and so much frustration. I mean, and it all comes from communication. We even will go so far to just drop this here and then run away from it because we're not going to completely get on this. But we really think that like a lot of therapeutic interventions and a lot of life coaching and things like that, we feel like they're, even with our verbal de-escalation that we've taught, we've come to the idea that we're sort of applying tools without really teaching a person how to handle those tools internally. That's where we're coming to as well. We want to make sure that you have a foundational level of control instead of letting emotion control you.
Yes.
So that was a lot of information, but really a foundation that we needed to express here in the moment. So we'll get back onto the costume.
Yes.
And where it comes from now.
That's right. So we talked a little bit in the last episode about where this all starts. And plain and simple, it's the kitchen table. It's our home environment, whatever that looked like for us. So we all copy the models that are there for us. The parents, the other siblings in the household, whoever we grew up with, those are the first people we learned from. And we find out real early that being loud is often confused with being right. But either way, it feels like the safe place to be.
Yeah. And I want to say this very carefully because this will be really easy to take out of context. One of the things that's always bothered me about cancel culture is that a lot of the things that we're condemning people for are being condemned by people in this era. And there were certain normalized behaviors, not appropriate by any means.
Yeah.
They were not appropriate. But if you look at the comedy, the stand-up comedy, even shows that were on, there was a lot of comedic performance that celebrated basically these dysfunctional behaviors. I mean, they made it funny and we knew it was wrong. They made us laugh at things that we're completely offended by now. And that's the thing that's always bothered me by cancel culture is that you're taking it out of a context. I'm not justifying it by any means. All I'm saying is that it was so widespread, just like the tools that we're teaching you now that you're not aware that you already have and trying to bring them to the surface. We weren't aware back then that these things were as offensive as they were because the same problems we're having right now in 2026 because no one would speak up for it, you know, because they became the problem. Like Carolsue mentioned last time in one of our previous videos, the person with the issue ends up being the villain instead of the people that are exhibiting this kind of behavior. So that's something I really want people to keep in mind. I mean, we've seen careers being completely demolished because of something that's completely being taken out of context. And because that person is a good person, has changed themselves after 20 years, which no one's paying any attention to. All they care about is what they did 20 years ago that's still on film. We're losing good people that have learned from mistakes. I mean, and the real education comes from making serious mistakes and rising above those mistakes and not only correcting those mistakes, but going back and doing as much repair as you can for what you did without your own knowledge. You know, you didn't realize that that was hurtful stuff. I know I've done a lot of things that I am very embarrassed about that I will never tell you on podcasts because I don't want to be canceled.
How glad are we that there were no smartphones when we were growing up?
Exactly, yeah. Or internet. You know what I mean? That's another thing. So just keep that in mind that everything we're talking about right now was given to the people that passed it down to us. And it's because they didn't know anything else. Just wanted to get that out of the way. So as you said, at the dinner table, but when you think about it, just think about something as simple as racism. We're isolated in our pockets of culture. Those things get passed down. There are a lot of us that knew our grandparents. And they had very, very solid ways of thinking.
They did.
That's the best way to put it.
Yeah, I was leaning towards rigid, softer. Solid is softer.
No, rigid is accurate.
Sometimes it's rigid.
Yeah. And that information was passed down, but it was passed down in a normal way. Like this is the way the world is, and this is the way you need to conduct yourself. So we're having to unlearn a lot of things that were normalized, very normalized. Not more than 2 decades ago.
It's true.
So it's just something to think about as we're doing this. And we're saying this mostly for the people that are doing it still and will be offended by the fact that we're identifying it as problematic behavior, because one of the things that we're sort of disassembling here is power. You know, and that's the big deal. There's a lot of people that they get a cause and they become a crusader for this cause, but they are some of the meanest people that you could ever meet. So in a lot of cases, there's a lot of advocates that are actually hurting the cause of the people that are trying to get better services, trying to get their rights increase, trying to protect the rights that they have right now. Regardless of what you might think, like we've said before, historically, protests that are violent in any capacity don't get the message across, and they don't get the outcome that they're crusading for. And unfortunately, when you don't have that anger and you're thinking rationally, you can see it.
That's true.
Yeah, but if you keep yourself embedded in that cause, in that anger, in that rage, that really is unnecessary. And I'm going to say it over and over again because people are going to say, you got to feel that rage. You don't. I can be just as passionate, just as aggressive. And I mean that when I say aggressive, I just mean activity-wise. Like I can work on this twice as hard as an angry person is working on it without being angry.
Yeah.
And that's something to think about, but also that's social conditioning. People think anger must accompany passion in order to show how serious we are or how much we mean it.
And in order to create and impact change. So I'm going to share an example from personal experience. As you may remember, I work in homeless services, and from time to time we get complaints from people in nicer, more upscale neighborhoods who are uncomfortable with homeless people being visible near their neighborhoods. They feel unsafe, they feel scared, however they feel. And the advocate in me who wants to defend the people I work with thinks, well, how dare you be judgmental? You don't know what these people have been through. But you have to think to yourself, if you come at someone with a very firm opinion that they're right, and you yell or try to guilt or shame them into changing their minds, they're actually less likely to change their opinions because now they're on the defensive. So what you've done is added to an already ineffective communication style by putting the same voice in there just on the other side of the argument. What has been far more effective for me is, hey, why don't you come take a tour of the shelter and let's talk about how these services work, and bringing them in and educating them about how we try to help, where the barriers are, how they can contribute. And more often than not, what we find is that over time, those mindsets start to change. And they'll say things like, I never knew that it was so complicated. I never knew how much went into this. I just thought if you were homeless, then it meant you didn't want to work. So the lesson that I learned was that trying to guilt or shame or coerce someone into changing their minds is incredibly ineffective. So we have to pivot and try to bring people in and share our knowledge in hopes of helping someone get a new mindset.
Yeah, I mean, ineffective is almost an understatement. It doesn't work.
Yeah,
that's
it doesn't work. You're right.
And this goes back to '01 or maybe even '02 of intent and impact. This is where we don't measure. We have our righteous desire to fix this, change it, all comes from a beautiful place. But change is what we're trying to do. And change means that we're trying to modify the outside.
Yes.
We're trying to get the out group or the different people to come on board. But that's not what any of our methods actually accomplish.
Yeah.
Racism has been going on for as long as I've been alive. There's always been something. And there was one thing that I thought about, and I saw an interview with Morgan Freeman. And Morgan Freeman said, they asked him point blank, what do you think we could do to reduce racism in some capacity? And he said, stop talking about it. We reinforce this every time we start pointing the finger and calling them one thing and us another thing. And that's what keeps it going. And to a certain degree, that's how I feel. Because if the only way that we're handling that communication-wise is insulting others, then it's ineffective. So stop talking about it is probably the best solution until honestly you can come on board with being more inviting and being more educational and respecting other opinions that are different from yourself, which we have actually gotten worse at in the last decade, which is really interesting.
Amazing, but true.
Yeah, which is really interesting from a perspective of people that are human watchers, which is what we do. We can see the trend. People have become more dug in. They've become more rigid.
More rigid, yeah.
That's a good word.
It is.
More rigid in their beliefs. And the interesting thing is, and this is something that, I'm going to sort of a grenade right here. Humans have this interesting capacity, and we used to do it a lot. Now we're questioning curious people. We have this interesting trait of filling in a lot of stuff in areas that we don't have all the information. We talked about the knowledge insecurity loop, but we have this need to feel like we know what's going on or we know what we're talking about in any moment. And a lot of times there's like nothing to support it.
Yeah.
Like, this is my belief. And people will say, well, why do you believe that? And they're like, I just do. But that's not an answer. You know what I mean? There's got to be evidence to support that led you to that belief. Otherwise, why aren't you even considering that there's an alternative?
Right.
If you don't have any concrete reasons as to why you believe that. I mean, even if it's just faith, that's at least something.
Yeah.
But most people that I ask, where does that come from? They're like, I don't know. I just do. I'm like, oh, okay. So if that's all you got, why do you get so angry if someone thinks differently and somebody that may have actual evidence as to why they think differently?
Yeah.
And that all comes from this defensiveness, this need to be superior, this need to be right. And that's really what's hurting us the most. And like you said, it all comes from the dinner table.
That's right. That's right.
Full circle, like I did.
Very good. So what we learned at the kitchen table as children is to copy the models of authority that we had in the household.
Exactly.
So if being loud and being right was the safe place to be, then that's what we shoot for, because we want to be right too. And what we come away with is the idea that we don't need any more reasoning than because I said so, to not question other people's beliefs or thoughts or patterns.
Yeah, I grew up in that environment. I heard that so much that actually there was a movie that came out called Because I Said So a while back, as I think it's like 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And just the thought of that put a knot in my stomach. I'm like, oh man, they're making a whole movie out of this?
Didn't watch that one.
Yeah,
huh?
I didn't watch
No,
that
didn't
one.
watch that one.
No. I mean, think about this, parents. You're not teaching your kid anything in that moment. I mean, if that comes on the heels of why. And if a kid's asking why, they need to understand it. They really need to understand it. Otherwise, that is what leads to these blind assertions that we end up sometimes violently defending.
It's true.
For absolutely no reason whatsoever. And we have seen in our training, we have broken through some hardcore 3-decade solid belief. I mean, we're talking law enforcement here, and there's a certain alpha kind of thing attached to it. Did I say that out loud?
What?
Yeah, in some cases.
In some cases, yes.
Not always. And luckily we have friends that will say,
yeah.
that are in law enforcement that'll say, yeah, it's there.
I mean, we've had the presentation in the room of arms folded and crossed.
Oh, yeah.
Glaring at us without blinking as if they're saying, go ahead, try to teach me something.
Exactly. And we're not beating this information into them, we're offering it, and we precede everything with freely given and freely ignored. And secondarily, and the big finish is, and we don't care if you change your mind.
Nope.
That's the thing. I mean, we do. We want you to.
We do.
Yeah, but we're not going to get upset with you, and we're still going to treat you like a person. And that model is very obvious in our training.
That's true.
We've had people come up to us and say, I had never thought about it that way. And I've been hit in the face with this kind of stuff. I've been yelled at, and I have never really given it any thought because I never really had any reason to think about it before. I had my belief. I knew what it was. I was comfortable with it, and I stuck with it. But this actually, just for a moment, made me think, why am I so stuck on this idea? And that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, so it's both deliberate and a little diabolical, the way we try to present information. Because if we try to push back as hard as you're pushing to reject the information we're giving you, nobody's going to win. But if we can just lay it down on the table and say, hey, if you're interested, here it is, and we walk away, then we find more often than not than people, they want to know what we left on the table.
Exactly.
And that's how we get through.
I mean, it's not a manipulative tactic. This is really the way to bridge communication.
It is.
Things like, because I said so, or don't question me, or why are you doing this to me? That you're literally modeling that being questioned is a personal attack, which you are putting on them now. So you are passing that insecurity, you're passing that isolation down to your kid, and that becomes their model as well. And once again, it's not malicious.
It's not at all.
In some cases, and I think back to my childhood, and I've already shared quite a bit, which one of the things that I keep pressing here in case you're catching us in the middle and thinking, wow, that's some pretty personal information, is that's what we're doing, is we are disclosing things because we really don't believe that there are taboo subjects.
Yeah.
And we think that one of the major problems in society is that there are things that we don't talk about, that we need to talk about, that need to be more normalized instead of identified as something that's taboo or inappropriate or disrespectful. And because when you really sum it up, like we said before, the dysfunctional communication and where it comes from the fact that at one time somebody couldn't cope with a situation, and they got loud and they got directive and they beat somebody down for asking a question or saying something that was correct, and that person felt stupid in the moment. So all of the things that we have that make us not talk about things came from an insecure position. It came from a dysfunctional position, and then we normalized it. We made it, that's the way it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So what we learn when we grow up around these kitchen tables is that feelings aren't welcome and vulnerability is unsafe. So our parents or whoever raised us have this strong exterior around them. So we're taught without words not to question that and not to be vulnerable and not to look for a different viewpoint. And that's where the superiority really has a chance to grow, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's control and suppression, and that's made to appear as shelter and protection.
So curiosity gets shut down early in these environments because questions are seen as defiance. You're challenging my authority.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that being on top is the only place to be safe. So what's modeled for us is that superiority is what we should aim for, because being on top and being beyond question is the only safe place to be.
Exactly. And nobody should be beyond question. Nope. So you can put that as a very simple flag of, when I see that, then something's got to be wrong.
Yes.
You know, just keep that in mind. Also, I'm going to say something a little bit more personal right now. It's summertime where we live, so we are trying to pause so I can edit for every car that drives by the intersection around where we live. But there's a new craze of loud cars that just, we think they know we're recording, so they're literally going around the block and trying to prevent this information to get out to you. So please comment on us, but we're going to lighten up on how much we stop talking when we hear the cars in the background. And please let us know if it's still distracting.
Excellent.
Then we will go back to working harder about silencing. But for the most part, if it's just a low rumble, we can't help it.
We're going to push through.
Yeah, we've got soundproofing curtains up, and we're thinking about another curtain. But right now, we just want to push through, get this information. You know, and if you're driving in the car and you're listening to us, you don't know if it's our cars or your cars.
You probably didn't even notice.
Yeah, exactly. So just wanted to put that PSA there.
Very good.
All right, so back to what we were talking about. And those kind of things like don't question me, they get further cemented with the intimidation tactics that, like, if you start crying because I said don't question me, or I yell at you because I said don't question me, and then you start crying, and then I say something like, well, I'll give you something to really cry about. Those are the things that solidify that. And that really, honestly, it's bullying. I'm just going to say it. You are bullying your child. And you're not only bullying, but you're teaching bullying. And that's that superiority mentality. This is what leads to a lot of different behaviors in child development. That kind of bullying and that need to be superior and that being put into a child's brain and their level of understanding. You have to remember, they're understanding it on a different level than an adult would.
Yes.
Because of their vocabulary and their experiences. So planting those seeds, you don't have any control of where they grow into. Yeah. And this is the corporate boss, the CEO, who screams at all his people and doesn't take any input. And not only doesn't take any input, but like some of that input might be something that can prevent a problem. But instead, that problem ends up happening anyways, and those people get yelled at and they get fired because they were too fearful of bringing it up and trying to solve a problem. So there's so many catastrophic examples that go with this behavior. This is also the thing that generates the desire for revenge.
Yeah.
You know, when you feel you need to be superior and somebody has wronged you, and I have been at fault for this numerous times in my life. Like if somebody has hurt me and there's an opportunity for me to get the last word and find the most insulting thing that I can come up with to make you feel as bad as I feel in that moment while performing that it's not bothering me, then I would do that because that's exactly what I was taught. That's exactly what these particular parental directives provoke.
Yep.
And it's where they're coming from as well. You've now upset me, so now I'm going to hurt you more. If you keep crying, then I'm going to give you something to really cry about. I'll give you a real reason. And that further goes on to hearing things like, I don't get mad, I get even, or nobody talks to me that way, or I'm not wrong. They're just too sensitive. Those are exactly the kind of things that just shuts down communication without any analysis. We do this.
Oh, yeah.
All the time.
Very normal.
And this is why this stuff just keeps perpetuating and keeps continuing generation after generation. And we're trying to disrupt it.
As we do at Honest Voice, we would just want to emphasize that we are not here to blame the parents of past generations. We're all just playing from the same playbook that was given to us, that we inherited, right? And in previous...
Inherited. That's the perfect word right there.
Yeah. And in previous generations, the big push was to build character, to be strong. You have to go through hard times in order to be a strong, good person. So that's the script that influenced a lot of these choices. You're not going to question me. I'm your parent. How dare you? You just have to learn this the hard way, and that way it'll sit with you and you'll be a stronger person of good character.
And knowing what a lot of grandparents went through, they dealt with a lot of strife. So they're trying to build up protective measures in us to make us stronger and not break down, because they saw people break down.
They did.
People that didn't have coping skills, that couldn't handle the stress of wars and things like that. So they're trying to make sure we are not in that same boat as people that just couldn't handle it.
Exactly. But as we also believe very strongly at Honest Voice, intent does not erase impact. The intentions were very good, but the impact can't be ignored.
Yeah, receptivity is amazing. I mean, that's like a whole thing that we've discovered in our research. We said in the very beginning, one of the biggest problematic issues that we have in communication is that we all think we all communicate like ourselves. I would say, you know what, your real problem right now is that you're frustrated because you're comparing yourself to yourself out there. And why don't they just understand that this is a more effective way of doing things? Yeah. And it grounds both of us.
That's true.
In that moment. We're like, oh yeah, okay, this is abnormal. Everything we're talking about is different. We're asking you to jump outside of a generational comfort zone, a decade of programming comfort zone. And we're asking you to take on these more calmer traits. And we really believe that a good threshold would probably be a good thing, that if you feel negative emotions building, then that's a good identifier of something you want to explore. You want to be more curious about rather than judgmental about it.
Yeah.
Because just getting out of that judgmental mentality reduces that emotional reactivity. That's, like we keep saying, brings it back to the frontal cortex. I'm going to explore this rather than just get angry about it, because the bottom line is, what does that do for you?
Yeah.
What does getting elevated, what does getting angry, what does taking this out on somebody else do for anybody?
And if we can treat it as data and observe it and reflect on it, we'll have a much better opportunity to try to understand someone else's perspective and maybe reflect on our own behavior and see if there are things we could change for the better.
Exactly. Yeah. So the one thing we really have to get out of is that naming the cycle, naming the behavior, is not condemning the person doing it. That's one thing we got to get away from altogether. And that goes back to even how we call it out. And that's what this whole thing is about. We call things out from a very superior perspective. And soon as you even emote that or emulate that or whatever you want to call it, it shuts the other people down.
Yes.
That's the bottom line. As soon as you try to put yourself on that pedestal above everybody else, it immediately becomes a turnoff.
Yeah.
So you're not getting your real message. So those of you that are listening, if you are very compassionate about a cause, please consider this. What do you want to do? Do you want to perform that you're active?
Yes.
Or do you want to actually do something that contributes to your cause, that actually makes it move forward?
Yeah.
And that requires measurement.
It does.
That requires introspection. A lot of groups that are trying to push causes forward, I've asked them, so where are you? In the past 2 years, how far have you come? And they're like, what do you mean? They're not even looking at the change or an indication that what they're doing is effective. They're just doing it. They're just like going out, well, we do this, we stage this march. Okay, so after the march, what happened? And they're like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
So this is the kind of thing, if there is a passionate cause, we want you to think about that. How effective is what you're doing, or are you just doing this for yourself? So you can say, I did this. Is it more important that you get to post it on Facebook, or is it more important that you've actually made a dent in our social problems and trying to improve our life altogether?
Yeah. Spending several years teaching law enforcement officers how to be kinder to mentally ill people taught Todd and I a lot about the importance of receptivity and making sure that our messaging was set up specifically to appeal to people who had very strong feelings in some cases about this population. So we had to make sure that we massaged our messaging and set it up for the highest level of possible acceptance. That's important. That was part of our job in advocating for mental health and advocating for better partnerships with law enforcement.
It's true. Yeah. And this is something, just keep in mind, people did the best with what they had before getting this kind of information. But now culture is different. Everything, there's a lot of different, I mean, in the last 20 years, man, it is not the same landscape.
So much change.
In any capacity, not just in our cultures, but as we've said before, even just our social interaction is massively different. 20 years ago, like I said, if somebody saw a bumper sticker that they didn't like, they'd just walk along and go, what an idiot. Walk wherever they were going. But now there have been people that have literally vandalized a car because of somebody else's message. And it's not going to change that person's mind in any capacity. And now you've disrupted your whole life with a potential police record now or something like that. So it's just really interesting what's going on at this moment.
Yeah. So let's talk about the ripple effect and how what we learned at the kitchen table scales up as we get older and move through life. So homes that were built on intimidation raise communities that normalize intimidation. This is how it happens without us even realizing that it's going on. So at some point, aggression starts to look like strength, and even scarier, calm starts to look like weakness.
Yeah, which is really different, because like I remember my grandfather, and you've told me stories about your grandfather, and they were very stoic.
Very stoic.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like I don't remember my grandfather ever yelling about anything. And I remember people saying that, oh no, he's quiet. That's scary.
No, that's true.
The part.
That's
when
true.
you do something wrong and then he doesn't give you any contact or talk to you for a little while, that's the part that creates the shame and the fear internally. So it's really strange to be aware of that and see where we are now, where you turn on the news and we just see nothing but a bunch of screaming heads. And it's not just a bunch of screaming heads, it's a bunch of very uninformed screaming heads, very opinionated, very one-sided. I mean, literally demonstrating closed-mindedness in almost every program, and people are being influenced by that, and it's very problematic. And they see these behaviors, and what happens is when they're communicating with somebody about what they saw on the news, if they get any opposition, then they will emulate these behaviors. So now they've literally influenced the public to become like them. And the worst part of it is that they're not even informed. They're not even well informed. It's like literally speculating about something that in some cases I have to say, like, I have no idea where that came from. Like, where did you come up with that? And it's very baffling. And it's also very concerning because there's going to be people that are sitting on their couch going, yeah, that's the way it is, you know, and then may even act on that. So if I had, this is probably a dangerous thing to say, but I'm going to put it out there because it's a podcast and people can just turn it off. If I had to like modify our rights in any capacity, when it comes to the First Amendment, if you know, you can't yell fire in a theater, right? So there are clauses, there are guardrails, but I wish there was like a clause in there that said, if you have any kind of public voice, like if you're on a TV show or you are saying something that you know is being put on the news, that you must tell the truth.
Yes.
Like you cannot.
That be so nice?
Yeah, that would be so cool. You can't speculate because the weird thing is, and I'm saying this, and I'm definitely showing my age here, but that was actually a thing of credibility 40 years ago.
That's who you look to for the truth, right?
Exactly.
The people on the news.
Yeah, you would get on the news. Like Walter Cronkite was very well known for just speaking the news, getting exactly what the facts were. And the weird thing is that they're accountable for those facts. And the number of news shows that we've watched, they always say with like newsprint, what are your sources? And then they protect their sources. And those sources must be credible sources. And those sources must be proven. But now you have people that don't even have to talk to any sources. And they just come up with their own wild ideas right on TV and influence the public. And that has been so problematic. And we can visibly see it. We have had people attack us and then they'll say, well, you're wrong because last night on such and such, I saw this, and they're getting escalated just like that individual. So it's like, and then we'll ask the simple question, okay, well, where did they get that information from? And they're like, well, I don't know. Yeah. So why are you spouting this? But the thing that I'm saying, it's so problematic that people in a public influence sort of capacity are allowed to just say whatever they want and influence the watchers. And that, I think, has contributed to a lot of division in the world.
Agreed.
Right now is because of these things that there's a certain piece of us that thinks this has got to be coming from a credible source.
I know. You want to believe it. You want to believe that these people are telling the truth because the actual reality is a little more scary.
Yeah. So back to what we were talking about, this aggression, these ideas, the intimidation tactics, the superiority, that starts to look like it's a strategy. It starts to look like this is the way we're supposed to be. When things that we don't like are happening, then we attack it.
Yeah.
And we look stronger and we look bigger and we have to get that angry voice out there in order to be effective. And that's just not the case. And the other problem is that any deviation, any difference in what we call the norm, which is a very dysfunctional norm, it's got to be wrong.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
And it's not, because we've just been doing this wrong so long that we've gotten so good at doing it wrong.
We have.
Yeah.
We really have.
So that's where we get these influential ideas of that's just how the world works. And okay, where'd you get that from? You know, and you just have to be tough or you're going to get walked on. And one of the things that we keep saying and in honest voice is that you can still stand firm in your ideas without being aggressive. And if somebody does try to walk on you, then you can very calmly correct that.
Yeah.
But these preventative measures that we think keep this from happening don't keep it from happening. They just lead to conflict. It's just something we've been telling ourselves for so long that we believe it's true. And we want you to test us on this. Please feel free to comment like, hey, this seems like a lot of BS, but we're going to ask you to at least test it first before you say that. Because if you're speculating and you've never tried it, then once again, you're an uninformed resource. You know, we just want to bring that to your attention. What information are you using that is creating this deduction for you?
We really just cannot overemphasize the importance of curiosity all the way around. It comes into play in so many conversations and personal disagreements between spouses and family members, but also when we are challenging information that we've had our whole lives. Be curious. Where did it come from? Why do I feel so strongly against this subpopulation? The more you can stay in a curious space, the more you can combat this superiority behavior, judging things that we may not fully understand, and we can open the door for other people to introduce new ideas and continue to get smarter and more educated and more compassionate. It's just such a powerful tool, being curious.
Yeah, it's true. The punishments that we get for inquiring or for being curious, they change our behavior to not do that.
Yeah.
So we just create these assumptions. Like I said, we fill it in and create these assumptions. But also, we've also been trained that if we don't understand it now, that's bad.
Yeah.
And that's where the knowledge insecurity loop comes up, because we don't want to ask more information because we're going to get yelled at.
That's right.
Which keeps us from asking for more information. And it just, the cycle
continues.
The cycle continues.
The cycle
That's why it's a loop. Yeah.
So how do we break the cycle?
Yeah, let's talk about that now.
Yeah. So we want to be able to set firm boundaries without humiliating other people.
Exactly.
It's important to know where you stand. It's important to have respectful conversations, but not to push back with shame or volume or anything else to try to shut somebody down.
Yeah, just like I told you in one of the episodes about that tag hanging out of my jacket.
Yeah.
I could have easily said, mind your own business. But I said, I think what the problem is you're having trouble coping with it because I don't really care.
Clearly, you're the one who keeps bringing it up. It's
exactly.
obviously not bothering.
But I could have normally got aggressive, said something condescending, and that person wouldn't have had an argument. It's like if somebody would have said, he was so rude to me, it's like, well, why were you needling at him? Somebody would have justified that behavior because it was normal behavior, but it doesn't change anything.
Right. So we also want consequences that are predictable and explained, not that are just delivered for dominance. So we don't just want to shut other people down. We want to explain why certain kinds of communication are less productive or maybe even hurtful so that people can understand where we're coming from.
Yeah, like case in point, when I talked about that person that was yelling at me through the Zoom conversation, I had the opportunity that luckily it stopped.
Yeah.
And then I tried to do some repair for that person because I knew they were embarrassed about it. I could tell immediately because they shut down when I didn't reciprocate.
Yep.
So I stayed calm, but I could have very easily, in the midst of that, say, I'm no longer going to continue this conversation because you're being disrespectful right now. That would have been easy. It didn't have any aggression on my part. It just identified what my boundary is, and I'm not going to continue this until you can act in a professional manner.
Yes. Yes. We've talked about in prior episodes that boundaries don't exist to stop other people from what they're doing. They just create our own expectations of what we will and will not tolerate.
Exactly.
So you can keep screaming, but I'm not going to continue this conversation if you're going to keep screaming.
Yeah, and even when people make like an egregious mistake, say they blurt out something inappropriate, all you have to do is say, okay, that's offensive to a lot of people, and I want to discontinue that in our house. See, it didn't take a call out, an insult, a shaming thing. How could you say something like that? And just trying to make the person feel bad for that mistake that they have been conditioned to make that mistake over and over again, which wasn't a mistake, say 30 years ago. Or it wasn't a mistake that anybody countered, or it wasn't a mistake in their culture. Maybe let's put it that way. Yeah. In their in-group or whatever that
all
may
the
be.
Variables. That's why we talk so much about variables. There are so many variables.
There's a lot of variables. Yeah.
So many variables.
So it goes back to what we were saying. We condone the emotions in that moment.
Yeah.
The beliefs that we create in that moment and how it affects us. But your behavior is separate.
Yes.
And we don't have to endure the behavior that an individual is giving us in that moment.
Perfect. So these tactics work because when you just choose to retaliate against a bully by using the same tactics, you're feeding the pattern. You're continuing the belief that that works.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, they're bullying because they're pushing the superiority perspective.
Yes.
And now you're trying to over-push the superiority over their superiority.
That's a never-ending cycle.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
So steadiness really gives their aggression and their fear nothing to push back against. They lose the fuel to fight because there's nothing they're pushing back on, because you're not giving them anything to push back on. It's really amazing how easy it is.
I don't mean to be funny about this, but I've been doing this for a while, and this is so widespread that I've had people like try to provoke me, and I'll be like, I see your point, but I really have no opinion. And it almost feels like their eyes starts twitching. Like I was really ready for this argument. I prepared for this argument. I worked on this argument for like 2 hours in the mirror, and now I come to you and all you have to say is, I see your point, and you didn't get provoked.
Yes.
I mean, it almost like baffles them and locks them up. I mean, it's like if they were an android, you'd see sparks coming out and twitching to the side, something like that.
And in a more fundamental way, if someone is using bullying tactics, then they're feeling weakness and trying to cover that up with superiority. They want to feel powerful. And when you meet them with calm, respectful responses, you're still validating their humanity without feeding that superiority.
Exactly. And you have to also remember the foundation of that superiority. It comes from shame. It comes from fear. It comes from trying to sit with a feeling that you don't like in yourself. Like when we are ashamed, a lot of us get mad at ourselves for even feeling that shame further shame ourselves. So it becomes so uncomfortable that when you don't feed it in any capacity for somebody else that's bullying, it really starts to reduce it. It really starts to, I mean, it's basically just modeling that you don't have to act the way you're acting right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you that in this moment.
Yep, exactly. You're taking the fuel away, and it's a little deflating, but hopefully it starts to retrain the person who's using those tactics that they're not necessary to get their point across.
Yeah. So the main thing with those uneasy feelings that we get when we're being the bully, even if we're going to call it bullying, even if it's on a lower level, just putting somebody down kind of thing. It's just it's a typical term that everybody knows. If you use our tools and you learn to stop taking these things so personally and that it's just data, that shame will dissipate. You'll realize that I am creating these ideas in myself based on things that have been put on me all my life. And if I'm the one who keeps it going, I'm the one who also can stop it.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Helps us take our power back.
Exactly.
Yes. Though it may feel strong to meet a loud voice with a louder voice, what we know is that the strongest correction that you can ever offer is the proof that calm is stronger than control.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. The person that was yelling at me through the Zoom, this is a very self-proclaimed alpha, but I knew the person long enough to know that they had a very good heart.
Yeah.
Internally, they were very kind. So this was definitely the shame of not knowing something that overwhelmed them in the moment, and they've never developed coping skills to deal with that feeling. So they exploded.
Yes.
And the embarrassment occurred in front of a group of people.
Yeah.
So because there was a lot of people in that Zoom. So I recognized that right away. And like I said before, when you get to a certain point and you read this information, you see that pain, and there's no way you could assert superiority over someone that's doing that. When you see that pain, when you see somebody screaming and you realize it's fear and it's anguish, and they're embarrassed and it's really hurting them, there is nothing good that can come out of putting them in their place.
Nope.
Which is, as people say, I once read that it's the mentality of feeding poison to somebody who's been poisoned and thinking they're going to improve, which I thought was a really interesting analogy. Actually, it was sort of mindset changing for me to hear that. I'm like, yeah, I never thought about that before. But that, once again, as our punishment has developed into our being punished as a kid, as it's evolved into an adult, we really think we have to get them back.
We do.
If they hurt us, then we have to hurt them back in some capacity.
So as we love to do here on Honest Voice, we're going to talk about some tools and reflection for you this week.
We're in a home stretch.
So this week, what we'd like is for you to name one thing that you do under pressure that you can trace back to your own kitchen table. What are the lessons that you learned as a little person that you're still carrying with you today? Just think about them. And then notice whether those things are still protecting you or whether they're protecting an old fear that no longer has any relevance in your life.
Yeah, I have these like fantastical ideas when we're doing this stuff and we're working on the scripts. Like, so what I envision is that this stuff becomes like a game in the house because you've got this normal dysfunctional way of communicating. It's natural. It's normal. It's nobody's a villain here.
Yeah.
But say the kids and family members or even couples just watch the video and say, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to shame each other. We're not going to put each other down. We're not going to do that passive aggressive sarcasm that is supposed to be banter. That's really an insult disguised as humor.
Yeah.
When it's not good. Stop. No. Yeah. But it becomes a game, where a kid feels comfortable. And of course you need to tell them, don't do this with other adults.
Right.
But being able to say something like, Mom, we don't want to shame anybody, or Dad, we don't want to talk about them like that. Giving everybody a voice. So even mom, child, we don't want to talk about that. Making everybody on equal footing when it comes to improving this communication will teach some really, really appropriate skills for your children. Of course, you want to tell them very clearly, do not do this with other adults outside the house.
Don't tell your teacher not to shame people.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, that would do so many things. One, it would teach appropriate communication, recognition of this so they don't internalize shame themselves.
Yes.
But this would reduce defensive provocation tremendously. When a parent can get comfortable with their child correcting their behavior that they all agree is inappropriate behavior.
House rules, that's right.
Yeah, house rules.
Yep.
Yeah, in a very respectful manner, then everyone becomes less defensive. Everyone starts looking, you start modeling this and you start reinforcing it. I'm getting a little excited here, I'm sorry. So I can just see this in my fantastical family. In fact, I wanted to create a series of TV shows, but it wouldn't make it past the pilot. It's like, where's the conflict? Why isn't anybody in trouble? Why isn't anybody doing
Nobody's
something?
mad.
Yeah, why isn't anybody doing something they're not supposed to be doing right now? I can't watch this.
No.
It's completely unrealistic. What are they talking about? But yeah, that's my big social fantasy once again.
So for practice this week, if someone tries to pull you into a contest of who's superior, if they try to push their beliefs on you or they raise their voice, then we want you to just decline the invitation. That simply don't engage.
Yeah, I gotta tell you the story. I must have had aspects of this in my brain before we got into the crisis intervention stuff, because I remember when I was E6 at the time, I was first class in the Navy, and this senior chief started telling me, well, back in my day, I started doing this and this and this, and I don't know what it was, but I responded to him with, well, senior chief, I'm not half the man you are, so there's no way I can do that. And he got so uncomfortable. It was the same thing we're talking about right now. It's like, if you need to be superior, have at it, brother. Because I'm not going to argue with you, and I'm also not going to cater to it. There was a hint of sarcasm in there, but my brain always went to can he write me up for this?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I can't get in trouble for that statement, because I'm sounding like I'm just siding with him. You are the man. I can't compete. But it was really disarming. So there's a little hint of that kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the one thing. That's the one comment I like to make in crisis intervention is humility is very disarming.
It is.
It's a weapon in itself, because it makes the other person have nothing to fight with.
That's right.
So it's pretty interesting. So yeah, it's something to keep in mind. You can't unteach these behaviors, as we're always saying. This is the blue and the orange thing we've talked about in our books and in previous things. So you have to adapt these new behaviors, and the other ones will dissipate. And once again, it'll rewire your brain. You'll start seeing things differently, and you'll stop reacting, because now when something hits you, you go into what's this all about mode, instead of how dare them say that to me, or who do you think you are? So it will change over time. Once again, we are living proof of that kind of thing.
Yeah, very true. As is one of our most fundamental philosophies at Honest Voice, we know that none of us chose the table we grew up at. None of our parents, our grandparents, none of us chose where we came from. But once you can start to recognize how these behaviors influenced and shaped us, then we get to choose how we move forward.
Exactly.
And that's where we can end some of these cycles that have not served us well in communication and relationships.
Yeah, one tenet as a leader that I've always preached is, and it was a little different than my peers when I was in the military, the Navy, I was always considered the touchy-feely chief, because I wanted to talk, I wanted to learn. But one of my tenets, as cliche as it may sound, is that if you take care of the person, the work takes care of itself. Not always looking at the work and saying, get to work and you need to work harder and you need to work faster. If you really get to know your people and you find out what their motivations are, what kind of praise they like, if you just get to know the person, then the work improves, because they'll want to do their best for you. The best leaders are the ones that make people want to follow them, not the ones that force themselves on them.
Yep.
So keep that in mind. You take care of the person, the rest of this stuff will just fall into place.
Yes. And just as successful as it is for the people that we're working with and the people around us, it also works for ourselves. So you can take care of the kid that you used to be if you can treat yourself with that same kind of compassion.
Exactly. Like we're always saying, when you beat yourself up, you're just using the shame that you put on other people on yourself now. And stopping that behavior altogether is our goal.
Yeah, exactly right. So thank you, our wonderful audience, for hanging out with us for this episode. We enjoyed it. We hope you did too. And we hope you have a great week.
Take care.